In this video I will make a table saw spline jig to reinforce miter joints. This piece of board will be the base of the jig. This edge is perfectly straight. Now all the faces of this strip are parallel, and I will put it here, with one face perfectly flush with the edge of the board. So I have here this stop block. I put the strip against the stop block, and I put a taller strip against the first one. So now I put the edge of the board on the first strip and against the taller strip, and making sure I don't move anything, I drill guide holes, and I insert some screws. I must make sure I don't put any screw in the way of the circular saw disc. So now I want to put this piece of plywood board here, and I need some room to screw later the guiding strip. Now this edge is perfectly straight. And if I put this edge on the base, and I put the face of the board against the corner of the strip, like this, I can move the plywood board like this, and I know this face of the board will always be parallel to this edge of the base. But to make this spline jig, it must be at 45 degrees. So now I mark one line there in the board. Now I will drill some guide holes in the line. So I have there the guide holes on the line. I turn the board and I insert the screws in this side of the board. I don't want them to protrude the other side. Now I put the base with the strip against this stop block. I put the board at a 45 degrees angle and I screw it, trying to keep it at 45 degrees. And now I realize I must put some screw below the corner of the strip I have behind the board, so I move this screw some millimeters down. So there we can see some screws slightly above the corner of the strip, and those screws push the board trying to turn it like this. Then I must put some screw below the corner, so it can push the board trying to turn it like this. I thought this would be more difficult, but finally I could put the board at 45 degrees in the first try. Now in this triangle, this corner has a perfect 90 degrees angle. It can be some difficult to cut a perfect 90 degrees angle in my shop, but I usually have some of these boards I buy in a DIY center. So I just have cut the corner of one board, because the corners of these boards are at a quite perfect 90 degrees angle. Now I have this stop block and this stop block, so I put here this piece of plywood board, and I have some room here to put the plywood triangle. And I screw it. Now I have this stop block, and I put this against it, and here I have room to put this board against the piece I made before. I make sure everything is flush and I screw the pieces. Like this I get this piece. Well, I also have to make here one notch, so I can put there one clamp, and I put this here in the jig against the board. So now I have another piece of board, and I have to put this one here like this. And to keep it in place I will use another strip. So I put some glue in the strip. I put it against the board and I glue it to the base of the jig. Now I put some glue in the corner between the strip and the board. I spread it to make sure it makes contact against both pieces, and I keep the jig like this while the glue dries. When the glue is dry, we can see the pieces stay together, but not rigidly. So first I will screw the strip to the base. I must make sure I don't put any screw in the way of the circular saw disc. And now I want to screw the board to the strip. As we could see when I screwed the first board to the first strip, if the screws are above the corner of the strip, they push back the board. So I will put 2 or 3 screws below the corner of the strip, so they push down the board against the base of the jig. And as always, I must make sure I don't put any screw in the way of the circular saw disc. So now both boards are quite rigid, and they make an almost perfect 90 degrees angle. And this piece slides here between both boards. And now I will install the guiding strip. The circular saw disc will go through this way, and the top part of the disc will be more or less here. So I want to be able to move the jig until it is around here. So I will put here the guiding strip, but under the jig base. And when the jig is in this place, I want the guiding strip to hit against the screw I have here in the groove. Later we'll see what to do when the saw disc protrudes the back of the jig. Now I mark the position of the guiding strip. I put the strip under the base and I align it with the marks, and I drive one screw. So this edge of the base is the reference to make the jig. I move the strip until it is at 90 degrees with that edge, and I clamp it. And I drive another 2 or 3 screws to attach the strip to the base. So now I can fit the guiding strip in the groove in the table saw. Now I will turn the saw on. I must watch where to put my hands, and I move the spline jig until the strip hits the screw in the groove. Like this I make sure I don't move the jig more than needed, but the disc protrudes the back of the jig. So I will put there some pieces of strip to cover the disc. When we make meter cuts, we get these leftovers. They are perfect to put against the board. I cover all that place and I let the glue dry. Now, instead of making this like this, I could put there another piece like this one. The way I made it, I have that height of cut. And if I had made a piece like this, the height of cut would be much less. Now, when the glue is dry, I cut the groove in the pieces of wood I've put in the back of the jig. And now we can see the disc is covered. Now I put that piece in the jig, and I put the meter joint I want to reinforce against the plywood triangle of that piece. I slide that piece until the groove in the jig is more or less centered in the edge of the meter joint. I fit the meter joint between the boards that make the 90 degrees angle. I tighten that clamp. I clamp the meter joint against the plywood triangle, and I cut a groove in the meter joint. And now I can cut all the corners of that workpiece. Now I have cut the corners like this, but it is very difficult to center the groove in the edge of the corners. So I've cut like this. And now I turn my workpiece like this, and I will cut all the corners once again. This way the grooves are perfectly centered in the edge of the meter joints. Now, after I glued these wooden pieces, this board is rigid. But this one still moves a little bit, so I will also glue some meter cut leftovers behind it. Now, back with the meter joints reinforcement, I have to reduce the thickness of that wooden splint so it fits perfect in the grooves I've cut. Now I cut 4 triangles that are some bigger than the grooves I've cut, and I glue them inside the grooves. When the glue dries, I cut the excess. And I sand the corners. And here I have the meter joints once I've reinforced them with the help of this table saw spline jig. Thanks for watching. If you think this jig is useful, don't forget to click like and share. Remember that you can find all my woodworking videos in my channel in YouTube. And if you like my videos, thanks for subscribing to my channel.